Ian Trache in Phoenix at Turning Point USA, and I'm with Ali Shultz, Juris Doctorate, founder of Hands for Health and Freedom.org. Rachel with
Republicans for National Renewal.
Republicans for National Renewal is also here.
Also a Juris Doctorate.
Also a Juris Doctorate. That's right. And it's, for listeners that are familiar with me, you know that it's Trache like Cartier, and that caught your attention last night, Rachel, at the reception. But Ali, this is the first time we're meeting. So I'm with two Juris Doctorates. Ali, who are you? Make an introduction for listeners.
Hi. Well, I am just a human. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids, 7 and under. I'm a lawyer. I have fought in this medical freedom fight for the last year, but found myself in an extremely touchy situation with both of my in-laws who live on my street and are like my own parents, both in separate ICUs at the same time. And I just learned so much from that experience that now I just feel it's my mission to help others with this.
Okay. You said ICU?
Correct. Intensive care unit at a hospital.
From what?
COVID.
Okay.
So, for the record, I totally believe in early outpatient treatment. I feel like ivermectin works. I think there's a lot of things that work, not just ivermectin. But for whatever reason, my in-laws, who also believe that in early treatment, they were not on the right dose for them. And we just got a call one day that my father-in-law felt like he needed more oxygen. And so he was going in an ambulance to Mayo. So we had nothing in order. I can't believe that. I'm a lawyer. I need to have that in order for my family. But I literally met him in the hospital parking lot and had him sign that I'm medical power of attorney, and then his advance directive for no remdesivir, no intubation, and no vaccine, because that's his MO.
Okay, that was his request.
Correct. And so we, had it signed, witnessed, notarized. I had my notary friend meet us in the parking lot there. And I knew I didn't feel comfortable with what was going on in the hospitals, but I didn't know how bad it actually is. So meanwhile, my mother-in-law 2 days later finds her way to Banner Thunderbird. She was there for a very long time, and she eventually died. My father-in-law, he was at Mayo for 27 days. They deprived him of hydration for 6 days. So at Mayo, my father-in-law was there for 27 days. They deprived him of hydration, so no IV fluids for 6 days. No nourishment to his body for 6 days, except for 1 bag of D5 water. It's like an electrolyte water. And I literally was begging them, crying, begging them to hydrate him. They said that is their protocol to dry out the lungs in COVID patients. And I kind of went along with it for the first day or two, and then all of my nurse experts and doctor experts I know are like, no, this is not okay. Like, get in there. You have to fix this. So we did everything we possibly could. They still experimented on him with, even though they did not do remdesivir, they experimented on him with something called baricitinib. It's like an old RA drug that they doubled the dosage and repurposed and put it on the Fauci protocol. And it causes blood clots, bleeds, and it's an immunosuppressant. And then they kept him in seclusion for 24 days, which is crazy because the state guidelines are 10 days post onset of symptoms. So essentially, he could have a nurse or a doctor caring for him at the hospital that had COVID more recently than he had COVID, but he can't see his own family or his own medical power of attorney. This is a very big predicament. So we finally got him out. It was literally like a rescue mission. We had to set up every single thing, all the oxygen, the medical equipment, the transport, and we told him to say that he wanted to go home to do hospice. And that was the only way that we could get him out. We gave Mayo 30 minutes notice, and now he's doing fantastic. He
Saved his life.
You know, it was God. It was all God. There were so many angels that helped us in that situation. I've never had more of a spiritual experience in my life. Like, it was so divine, the whole thing.
So your legal approach, the power of attorney, it sounds like the hospital, if I follow that rightly, the hospital did not accept that? They didn't regard that?
Correct. Well, what they do is they play capacity against you. So if he was intubated and completely put out, then they would say that I'm medical power of attorney. But because he was alert and awake on a BiPAP machine, it's almost like a CPAP, but it goes breathing both in and out, right? Then when it was convenient for them and their goals, they would say that he had capacity. And then when it was not convenient, he would, like if we wanted him to sign something, then they would say he did not have capacity. And so, but regardless, this is happening in every federally funded hospital. So since I publicized this situation, I've had hundreds of families reach out with the same exact thing. And no, this is not a vaccinated or unvaccinated thing. Like my family, we personally do not believe in the vaccine. No pressure if someone does. But this is happening even if someone is vaccinated. If they're over 50, they're withheld hydration for 6 to 7 days. A lot of these people have died, but their families knew what was going on. And a lot of them have gotten out as well. But it's just, it's a really sad day because I guess we were just talking about how socialized medicine has come into America because it's every federally funded hospital. They must stay on this Fauci protocol or they could lose their federal funding. They would have to pay back any of their American Rescue Plan funds or CARES Act funds that they took if they go off of like evidence-based medicine. And then also they could lose their CMS reimbursement if they waiver from the Fauci protocol. And then as far as doctors are concerned, they have zero liability whatsoever for a COVID patient if they stay on this protocol. So they're incentivized to as well.
Rachel?
I mean, the idea, essentially, with socialized medicine is that the government is subsidizing, it's involved, and it can make decisions. And so if you have, and that's the concept, essentially. So if you have the government coming in and telling hospitals how that they can run protocols, how they need to run their systems, you know, what kind of funding they're going to have if they do things a certain way, what kind of funding they're not going to have if they don't do things. You know, I mean, they've got a leash on the doctors, and so whatever's medically right is not necessarily what's going to be pushed because that's not what's financially expedient or financially lining, you know, the hospital or the doctors or the insurance company's pockets. And so I think if you really boil it down and break it down, we could call that socialized medicine when the government is so closely involved and linked into the management of the funding in the hospitals and how they are administering medicine or what medicine they're administering.
You know, what I found is a lot of people, including myself, I did not realize that there's actually 3 stages to COVID.
And you're appointing a dictator to kind of define that health standard for you, right? And that's kind of what you were just saying with Fauci.
Right.
He's becoming kind of that health czar, right? Saying, no, it's this way, this is my team, this is the information. And I hadn't considered that until you just said that, Allie.
Well, he's not elected either. He's been in government for how long? 50 years in the administrative state? The administrative state is massive. You know, this is not an elected area of our government. So they can hold these positions through various presidents, as we've seen. You know, yes, he's still there with Biden, but he was there with Trump, but he was there before Trump. He was there under Obama.
Was there Reagan?
As well. He's been around for a while. I can't give you the exact, you know, year that he came in. But he's been around for several presidential terms. And so this is an apparatus of the government. It's a problem not
kind of
just...
like Pelosi.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
right, she's elected,
yeah.
but it is a problem. But so the administrative state, you know, I mean, people can work to get Pelosi out, you know, theoretically at least. But the administrative state is a massive part of our government that nobody has any say. This is like with the EPA and these other organizations that they have total control over their little fiefdoms. There's you've learned this in law school, I'm sure, Chevron deference. So if you want to protest, if you want to file against something, that the EPA did something wrong, you cannot go to any just normal court to file your case. You have to go to the EPA, who wrote the rules and wrote the laws on your situation that you're having an issue with. So it's an entire branch of government, essentially, that's unelected, that has total power and control over their fiefdoms, over their areas.
It's like, at what point do we say these protocols are not working in the hospital? These protocols, too many people are dying. Why can't we just evaluate another protocol? Because they're not treating the second and third stage of COVID. COVID consists of 3 stages. I'm not a doctor, but I know a lot of them that are doing the right thing here. And the first stage is a viral stage. It stays in the nose and mouth. And then the second is an inflammatory stage. It gets down to the lower lung. And then the third, it's actually a thrombosis. And so even if someone's body is getting pushed with so much oxygen from a ventilator or a BiPAP, then their cells have fused together that they cannot even absorb that oxygen to oxygenate for their body. And then most certainly, by depriving people hydration, that lessens the ability for our body to oxygenate as well. So we have never in our lives treated pneumonia patients like this, where they're told to lay flat on their back. We don't bronch them, we don't treat the inflammation, we're not allowed, nebulize budesonide or things like that in the hospitals. And so at what point can we say these protocols are not working?
So you almost, you're reluctant to put an individual into one of these health care centers, hospitals, whatever it may be. It sounds like Mayo Clinic. How did you get your father-in-law out? Was he consented to wanting to leave? Is that how they...
He was wanting to leave, but we've had many people who've wanted to leave before and they're not let out. We've had to get law enforcement involved for false
people you've represented.
Yes.
As a lawyer. So you're getting law enforcement involved. What does that look like? They're physically going in there with...
They go in as a civil standby, and they say this patient would like to leave against medical advice, and the hospital is holding them. And the hospital does not have jurisdiction over someone's body just because they're getting treated at the hospital. But they
What hospital?
They do.
Can you mention a couple of the names?
Oh my gosh, Marietta Hospital in Ohio. There's a few in West Virginia we're working at right now. Some in Texas. Honor Health, Thompson Peak here. I mean, it's all over. Any federal.
And the hospitals are literally trying to retain these people.
They're actually, without patients realizing it or patients' families realizing it, they are actually restraining people already by way of the oxygen. So they use this device called high flow oxygen now. And someone might have an oxygen requirement going into the hospital of about 6 liters or so of oxygen. And then they get them on this high flow nasal cannula machine that pumps in 60 liters. And it will be like 12 hours. And they'll have such a great oxygen need. And so no one can leave the hospital on that high of a oxygen need, and they know that. So they're essentially restrained and held in seclusion, which this is a really big issue because in order to seclude a patient or restrain a patient, unless it's a mental health thing, even for mental health things after a couple days, you need a court order. And they're doing this to people for months at a time.
It's insane.
Is it genocide?
That
What's
word,
happening right now, Rachel?
you could call it a form of genocide.
I mean, Lee Dundas just said that. She said it's a genocide.
Yeah, I haven't thought about applying that word to this situation, but
What is the situation?
I think there's no denial that it has been, in the best light, it's systematic, gross negligence. In the worst light, you can call it genocide, I think, because it's, it boggled my mind, and it shocked me when Cuomo was putting COVID positive patients into the nursing homes. We knew back then. We knew that the people at highest risk were people who were obese, who had comorbidities, and who were the elderly. People in nursing homes, they're not just elderly, they typically have some sort of health issue as well. This is why they're in a nursing home. They're not able to take care of themselves, or it's too intense for their family to take care of them 24/7, right? So you have the highest at-risk patients being exposed to COVID and being locked down, not being allowed to see their families. We've made this like prison health system. We've seen with Australia that they had these COVID camps. We just did it in our cities. We didn't take them out to some camp far away. That's what Australia's doing. We just did it right here under everybody's nose in the nursing homes or in people's homes or in the hospitals, held against their will, like with your family and with all the other people that you represent. I mean, it's insane. It's reminiscent of 1930s, 1940s Germany, to say the least, I think.
So here's why I think it's genocide. Hands
you
down.
do think it's genocide?
I absolutely do. Because...
And you're applying that.
Yeah, it's the first time I've heard somebody use that word to this term. Typically, I think of the Holocaust, or what happened with the Armenians.
I'm not trying to make light of any other situation or anything by any means.
Of course.
But this is why I think this is genocide. It's because of this. It's the same modus operandi that keeps happening to people. So it does not matter if someone has COVID symptoms or if they go to the hospital for a broken arm. They're all given the same protocol. So this is what happens. They go to the emergency department at any federally funded hospital. Immediately upon arriving there, they start an IV with something called midazolam. The brand name for that is Versed, and it is something that they use to induce a coma into people, but it's also a lung tranquilizer, and it causes a massive oxygen desaturation. It's also what they use for lethal injection.
Oh my God.
In higher doses. So this is part of the Fauci protocol. They do the midazolam, then they refuse service unless someone submits to a PCR test, which, as you guys likely know, over 97% false positives, with 35 amplification cycle threshold or higher.
Well, there's even worse with the swabs that they're sticking up, right next to your brain with the chemicals that are on the cotton swabs as well. That's dangerous as well.
Breaks the blood-brain barrier?
Oh, yeah. that happened to me, actually. They busted a blood vessel up there when I was tested.
How come they can tell me who my grandpa is by swabbing my cheek, but they have to swab my blood-brain barrier to tell me if I'm sick or not? It's crazy. So anyway, they swab these people with that test that you're talking about, and then they come back and they say, oh my gosh, you tested positive for COVID. You're just here for a broken arm, but you have COVID, you didn't even know. And look, in the meantime, the midazolam has set in and their lung function has been tranquilized and their oxygen desaturation has occurred. So then they say, thank God you're here. We are your saviors, the God complex. So they rush them up to the ICU. They keep all loved ones and advocates out. They immediately add remdesivir into the IV, and remdesivir is...
With consent or force?
Well, remdesivir is actually an approved drug now. Can you believe that? I mean, it's a failed Ebola drug. It did not make it through the Ebola trial because 53% of the people died of kidney failure. That's in our Fauci protocol. Mm-hmm. So they immediately start that remdesivir, and then when someone is dying of kidney failure or has kidney failure, it causes chest congestion. And so then they call the family and they say, I'm going to text you. I can't share with you the records because there's been a federal waiver and we no longer have to show you the records right now, even though it is still state law in many states that they must show. But they say, I'm going to text you a picture of your loved one's chest x-ray and look how awful it is. Look how bad the COVID is. And then they get the family to agree to vent the person. So the family agrees, they vent the person, and they keep the midazolam, and then they add the morphine. So the midazolam morphine thing goes on for about 6 days is their goal, to have the person dead. The most that they'll keep them in there is 27 days because after that they're not reimbursed for any of the care in quotations that they're providing for people. And so this is why I think this is a mass genocide attempt. I mean, these are 100% crimes against humanity. This is Nuremberg Code stuff. They cannot just do this to people. They're doing it to babies now. Newborn babies, PCR testing, confirming by saying they have fluid in their lungs. She was just in fluid. She was just born, you know? And then isolating babies, newborns, from their parents. And so that, I do think that this is just such a critical issue that people are aware that they need to stay out of federally funded hospitals. They need to understand how to get in touch with doctors that can keep them healthy at home, or better yet, learn on their own how to keep themselves healthy, because it really is all in our own hands as far as our health and asserting our rights if we get stuck in a situation at a hospital.
Well, I think an individual's best advocate is that own individual. Relying on the government to care for you the most is always going to be a mistake. We know that relying on somebody else to care for you the most is going to be a mistake. Same with the federal government. Just everything you said it's shocking. And the systematic way in which it's done, I think, is an argument in the column of, yes, this is genocide, because it is so systematic and it is so directed and purposeful, and because there have been so many other protocols that have been proven in thousands of people that have worked to help people get over COVID quickly and within 2 weeks, and those people are persecuted and demonized. We saw this with Joe Rogan. Before Joe Rogan was sick with COVID, I was sick with COVID end of July 2021. I had HCQ, I had ivermectin, I had a Z-Pack, I had some steroids to help me function because I was taking a 3-day exam, but isolated, of course. And I was over it in 2 weeks. I had a high fever, I was exhausted, small cough, minimal though, and 2 weeks, that was it. I didn't need to go to the hospital. I didn't need to go through any of these other things. And granted, for every individual, certain things could be different, but there's no reason to not try these protocols when they're not unsafe first. Give that a chance first before you start trying any of these other things that have been shown to be so dangerous and so harmful.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I just think that if it does get in a situation where you're debating going to the hospital, try anything you possibly can to stay home. If you get in a bind where you need help because you have a hospitalized loved one, we have a team of people that are helping do these hospital rescues. And you can find that information at our website, handsforhealthandfreedom.org. And we have a lot of the documents you can use to send in writing to the hospital, but also just ways to treat yourself and stay out of the hospital.
Is this a...
This is not medical advice, by the way.
This is not.
Please do your own research.
You're not a doctor?
No,
I'm not a doctor.
We're not doctors.
So you, what we're equating here is a socialized form of medicine applied, of course, to a pandemic regarding COVID-19 and these various variants now. But if you were an outside entity, so if America had an enemy, which America doesn't have an enemy, right? Right? Okay, so if you
disagree with that.
You disagree with that.
Okay,
good. If you were trying to destroy America, and you knew you couldn't face its military because the military is so massive, so you wanted to kind of infiltrate it in a stealth manner. Brigadier General Robert Spalding joined my show 2 years ago, and he said that the country has been infiltrated by a stealth enemy. And he labeled that enemy clearly in his book. Okay, I'm not going to say unless you know his work, I'm going to say who he thinks the enemy is.
Uh-huh.
But if the enemy has been successful at infiltrating the United States, but on a global scale, so it's kind of like, okay, well, we're going to watch some of these other countries also fall. I mean, okay, theoretical or not, but what we do see is that BLM, for instance, is saying, well, they're funded by George Soros, and they're saying we want a Cuban communist-style government in the United States. They make no bones about that. Where's that enemy coming from? Have you thought about what that enemy might be? What is it? Have you labeled it? Have you thought about that? So the socialized form of if this is a weapon in an arsenal, where could it be coming from? Where is it coming from?
I mean, if you think about the medical establishment, it's been infiltrated. I think a lot of industries have been infiltrated in America. But if you look at the medical establishment, 100 years ago, the Rockefellers took it over. They own Big Pharma. They own the medical schools. There is no one...
Rockefeller Medicine Men. You ever heard that book? Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked. I can send it to you. Go ahead.
But before that, orthomolecular biochemistry was where it is at. And I think a lot of people are getting back into that and using high doses of vitamins to treat certain things. And people live glorious lives without Big Pharma before this. And I think
that is probably the most stealthy infiltrator or enemy in the country. It is Big Pharma, because look at the people who have died in Hollywood over the last decade and a half. They said it was suicide or overdose. You've got Michael Jackson, you've got Heath Ledger, you have Brittany Murphy, right? What were they taking? They were like walking pharmacies with the amount of pharmaceutical drugs they were on. It's insane how much they were on. This is not logical. I mean, even Michael Jackson's doctor has been sued for malpractice because of all of the things that he was taking. But here's the other thing. We already know that Fauci and the NIH were funding the Wuhan lab where this virus was built and experimented with. I mean, it doesn't take too much intelligence to figure out, and this is the genius of the mainstream media, is gaslighting us to think maybe we are crazy, maybe this is a conspiracy theory. But the virus came from Wuhan, and there's a lab of virology in Wuhan, and there was a whistleblower doctor at that lab from Wuhan who disappeared. Maybe, just maybe, it was released from there. It's not insane to ask those questions. That's not crazy. And
that's freedom. To be able to ask those questions is freedom.
Frankly, that's proper journalism. So the fact that that's not happening anymore in the mainstream media really should be making everybody else question, why are we being criticized for asking questions?
Absolutely. Allie.
I absolutely agree. I think that they have 100% been infiltrated as well and are the right arm of Big Pharma in getting all of this done. I think there's going to be a lot of people held liable for this.
I hope so.
And I just hope it's soon. Like, how many more people have to die until...
And to what you were saying about Big Pharma, here's the other thing people need to realize. Big Pharma is funding the medical schools. This is why the first thing they want to give you is drugs. Not go for a walk, get in the gym, eat healthy, don't eat McDonald's, don't drink soda, eat more fruit, eat more vegetables, don't eat prepared food that's filled with preservatives. These are basic things. These are so common sense, but doctors are not going to ever tell you this. Maybe a dietitian will tell you this, maybe, but this is the best way to take care of yourself and to be healthy and to live longer.
So let's run with this real quick. The Rockefeller angle, because the Rockefellers medicine men, the Rockefellers manipulated. I mean, let's not forget that they were tried by U.S. Congress for antitrust issues, right? So a monopoly. But look, some of the work that I've done is I pulled back and I said, okay, we're the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers are largely in bed with J.P. Morgan, and J.P. Morgan was financed by some of these European bankers, primarily the Rothschild, okay? So if we do that, we pull back and we say 1913, the Federal Reserve Central Banking Act was passed in 1913. So if you're hiding behind the veil and the cloak of a private bank, but you're funding a government, essentially, you're able then... Okay, this is where it becomes theoretical, right? So people say, "Oh, it's just theory." And well, I'll pull back. It's not so much theory because it's a private bank. So if we're to assume, because we don't know who the shareholders are of that bank, we have to assume that the Rockefellers are controlling the healthcare system in the United States behind the veil of this central bank and some of the financial money behind that. Can we trace these roots back to Germany and say that what was happening in Germany with Adolf Hitler and killing millions of Jews and I mean that was genocide? There's no doubt about that. Can we pull back the veil and trace some of these money lines back to Europe?
I think that's a complex issue regarding the the philosophy of Hitler, a lot of that, frankly, goes it goes to Ford. Ford was Hitler's hero. He emulated Ford. Ford was printing, a famous known plagiarized forgery, in his Dearborn newspaper about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This was a debunked lie, that Ford reprinted and brought to the United States in the early 1900s to kind of reignite anti-Semitism in the United States. Jews have been around in the United States for a long time. There wasn't much anti-Semitism until Ford, until Dearborn. Look at Dearborn now. It's quite the hub for a lot of anti-Semitic groups, including Louis Farrakhan and Nation of Islam. So there's a lot of complex elements, I think, with Europe and anti-Semitism. You can look at the Catholic Church as well and the Jesuits. It's a complex issue. It would be interesting to trace the money back. And to see how that ties in as well. See how, I think it's more...
But we need transparency in some of these things for to do that.
We would. I think it might be a facet, one facet of the issue, one thread of the tapestry. But it's, but the anti-Semitism issue anti-Semitism in Europe is an issue that goes back, hundreds of, 1,000 years even, so it goes back a long way. But it would be interesting to research that.
Yeah, and with that said, what we do know, which is definitely not taught in public schools, is Prescott Bush financing through Union Bank the Hitler regime.
That is, I have heard that. Yes.
Okay, and the reason I got attuned to that was because I started investigating the Zika virus in Miami Beach in 2016, and I realized the Rockefeller, and you were in Houston, and the Rockefeller Foundation owning a patent the extraction process of the Zika virus from a British group called ATCC, and that yet also owning the majority shares of the Chevron Chemical Corporation that produced the pesticides. So they were bringing in the Rockefeller Foundation into both. And what caught my eye there is that this guy Sutton out of Stanford, the Stanford Hoover fellow, he was silenced by Palo Alto. He was censored, and he walked away from his fellowship at the Stanford Hoover Institute because they were trying to silence him. But that's what he was bringing to light, was that Prescott Bush, through Union Bank, and this is congressional record, because Union Bank was brought up on Trading with the Enemy Act for their involvement in openly funding, not openly, so open, but funding the Hitler regime during World War II, and also buying Ford manufactured trucks. So a lot of these things. Go ahead.
There's a huge connection between the Hitler regime and the United States. Frankly, they could not have pulled off what they did in Germany if it hadn't been for them. GM and the Blitzkrieg, Hitler and Ford. Hitler greatly admired Ford. This is a research paper I actually wrote during my master's on the ties between, America and Hitlerism, the Nazi philosophy, and so much of it, frankly, came from us first, and he kind of copied it and just did it more openly. There's eugenics. We were doing that first in the 20s and the 30s before Hitler picked up on it, even before the 20s, I believe. I haven't gone over the paper that I wrote in a while, so I don't want to misstate too much, but this is something that was happening, here in our country, before Hitler, and he took what we were doing, he saw it here, and he took it to the next level over there. So everybody, as a Jew, I will say, like, everybody's focused on what Hitler did, but it's important to realize, and I'm German Jewish, there's nothing to say in his defense. I will say, though, his ideas were not original. He got them from us, Wow. And there's a tie also between IBM and the 1933 census that identified every single Jew in Germany, that basically handed them all of the names, and then IBM helped them build the train schedules, so that everything could be, perfectly timed, and they were able to do this to such a large scale. They had a lot of help from American companies and conglomerates and, satellite companies that were set up in Germany as well. So this was not a singular effort, and, I would like to say, obviously there were another 6 million as well. Not everybody remembers. There were 6 million Jews. There were 6 million Germans as well that were considered undesirable in society. So whether they were, mentally impaired, or if they had health issues, or if they were homosexual, or if they were gypsies, just any part of society that, Germany or Hitler didn't like, there was another 6 million of them in addition to the 6 million Jews. And so America did help with this, and then you have during, FDR, everybody thinks that he was such a great president. He was not. There was a ship of Jews brought to the United States to save them. He turned that ship away. He sent it back. So, there is a long tie of, serious institutional issues.
And he confiscated all public gold.
That's a mess as well. So,
I think you might be intriguing Allie with some of your knowledge here, Rachel.
Yes, I'm very impressed. Wow.
Well, when you collect degrees, you learn a little bit. What you do with it, that's more,
You seem to be taking some action here.
Starting to. But it's, it's important for people to, do their own research, not believe everything they're being fed. And that was the problem in Nazi Germany. People just went along and they were compliant, they were complicit, they were okay with that. And that's what we've seen a lot here. I will say it's amazing, being able to see at a conference like this, Turning Point USA's America Fest. It's amazing to see so many people coming together, people who are standing up, people who are not blind to this and who are doing their own research and who are not complying and who are not just, buying everything that the mainstream media or the government is telling them. You have your own brain, you have your own mind that God gave you. Use it, think critically, don't rely on other people, figure it out.
Allie, some closing comments or some comments. What's going through your mind right now?
Well, when you bring up some of the medical experimentation that happened during that time in Germany, I'm reminded of the nurses that were so nice. And, all these families, they're reaching out to me right now. They say, well, this nurse talked to me and she was so nice, or he was so nice. I'm like, yes, but did you get hydration for your loved one today? No, they said they're not able to get hydration today. And so I guess I'm just bringing to everyone's awareness, like, just because someone is nice or charismatic, like the nurses in Germany who were rocking those babies and singing to them, and they were so nice to them, but at the same time they were allowing these experiments to happen, and they were actually injecting them with experiments. So just because someone is nice, look at their actions when they're taking care of your loved one, but more importantly, just try not to get in a situation where you would need to go to a hospital to be cared for, and establish your own group in your own community that you can go to for help. I'm sure someone has an oxygen concentrator if it will help you stay out of the hospital, or someone might have extra of something else to help you. But just have that network and have your knowledge base so that you don't get in the same situation that my family got into. And if you need any other information, handsforhealthandfreedom.org.
Well, I agree with everything Allie's saying, and people have always said to me, oh, they're so nice, and here's the issue. The devil can't entice you unless he's nice. So try to analyze what's actually being said, not the way it's being said. Try to analyze what's actually being done, the actual actions, not just, how nice it comes off, not just the nice, facade that's being put on. And, everybody really needs to learn how to think critically and do their own research. And, just don't rely on the government.
Great, ladies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.